0200 hours, February 23rd, 2026. In the treacherous waters of the North Atlantic, the electronic warfare system of the Russian spy ship, Yantar, suddenly blared to life. Radar painted the unthinkable. 12 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers had materialized from the fog, forming a steel ring around them. 152 American missile launchers stood open. The math was simple: 3 seconds to dust. But the Russian captain didn't panic. He was a veteran. He counted the signatures, noted the geometry, and made a calculation that would define the next 90 minutes. He was staring at a ghost fleet. He just had to figure out which one was real. The Yantar was sitting dead center in the GIUK Gap, the freezing, unforgiving choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. Beneath their hull lay the Atlantic Crossing 1 cable. This isn't just fiber and glass. It is the central nervous system of the Western Alliance. Trillions of dollars in daily financial transactions, encrypted diplomatic channels, Pentagon data moving at the speed of light. If Russia could clamp a listening device onto that line, Vladimir Putin would receive a live feed of U.S. military operations directly in Moscow, the ultimate Achilles heel of the West. That is exactly why the Kremlin sent the Yantar. Officially, Moscow classifies Project 22010 as an oceanographic research vessel. In NATO terminology, that is a polite way of saying cable-cutting spy ship. Operated by GIUK, Russia's top-secret main directorate of deep-sea research. The Yantar carries one specific, very dangerous piece of hardware, the AS-37 deep-diving submersible, capable of descending 6,000 meters into the abyss. Its titanium robotic arms are not designed to collect coral samples. They are built to splice, tap, and sever the lifelines of the free world. The Russian commander had calculated perfectly: freezing North Atlantic fog, zero visibility, surface conditions that would ground most aircraft. Turn off the transponders, run the engines quietly, and slip into position unnoticed. He severely misunderstood the battleground. The Americans weren't relying on radar. They weren't relying on satellites. They had a third invisible layer of protection waiting in the abyss. The Snakehead, large-diameter, unmanned underwater vehicle. A modular, AI-navigated robot built for long-endurance, seafloor missions. It had been sitting motionless against the seabed for 72 hours, waiting, watching, perfectly camouflaged, and it already knew the Yantar was coming. At 0224 hours, the Yantar's bridge was in controlled chaos. The captain stared at 12 Arleigh Burke signatures blooming across his tactical screen. Soviet naval doctrine had a countermeasure for this: switch radar frequencies, rely on the TK-25E passive sensors to filter the jamming, and reacquire the real contact. But the Russians were about to discover a catastrophic loophole in their own technology. The USS Donald Cook wasn't blasting them with static. It was deploying DRFM, digital radio frequency memory, through its upgraded AN/SLQ-32V6 electronic warfare suite. When the Yantar's radar pulse hit the fog, the American system captured that exact electromagnetic wave, manipulated its time delay and Doppler shift, and reflected it back in nanoseconds. The Russian processors are programmed to reject interference. They are not programmed to reject perfect physics. Every ghost ship on the Yantar's screen had a legitimate radar cross-section, a legitimate speed, a legitimate heading. The Russian combat system was choking on flawless weaponized data. 12 ships, one real, no way to know which. Trapped in an electronic cage on the surface, the Russian captain found his loophole. The Americans hadn't fired a kinetic weapon. This was gray zone, a standoff. So he made the one move he believed the U.S. Navy hadn't prepared for. He gave the order: launch the AS-37. He believed the deep ocean still belonged to Russia. He thought his $50 million robot was safe under the waves. At 0225 hours, the AS-37 submersible slipped through the Yantar's launch bay and descended into the freezing black water. The Russian captain watched the telemetry feed and allowed himself one moment of confidence. The surface was chaos. The seafloor was his. He had no idea something was already down there. The Snakehead didn't move when the AS-37 entered the water. It waited, let the Russian submersible descend through the thermocline, past the zone where surface sensors lose resolution, into the total darkness of the deep Atlantic. When the AS-37's cameras began scanning the seafloor for the cable, that's when the snakehead moved. It didn't fire a torpedo. It didn't ram the hull. It fired a high-intensity blue-green laser directly into the AS-37's optical sensor array. Blue-green wavelengths penetrate seawater flawlessly. The laser hit the Russian cameras with surgical precision and permanently burned out every sensor in the array in under 1 second. Simultaneously, the snakehead released a localized acoustic jamming burst, a precisely tuned frequency that severed the telemetry link between the submersible and the Yantar above. On the Yantar's bridge, the live video feed of the ocean floor dissolved into violent hissing static. Control telemetry flashed critical red. Russia's $50 million pride of the deep sea fleet was now blind, deaf, and completely paralyzed, drifting aimlessly into the freezing mud 3,000 meters below. The sabotage mission was dead before it touched the cable. The Russian captain recognized immediately this wasn't mechanical failure. He had been ambushed in the deep. Humiliated and desperate to reclaim the initiative, he made a reckless decision. He ordered his crew to spool up the Yantar's anti-submarine warfare suite. Depth charges, active sonar, a clear escalation signal. Before the operator could flip the switch, the ocean delivered a warning. A massive, maximum power, mid-frequency active sonar pulse detonated directly against the Yantar's steel hull. Inside the ship, the sound was deafening, not breaking glass, not causing physical harm, but reverberating through every steel corridor, like a wrecking ball striking an empty fuel tank. Every Russian sailor aboard froze. They all understood exactly what that sound meant. A point-blank active sonar ping against a surface ship is the acoustic equivalent of pressing a loaded weapon against someone's skull in a dark room. The message was brutally clear. We have a perfect firing solution. You are locked. A Mark 48 heavyweight torpedo is aimed at your engine room. You are alive right now because we are allowing it. The Russian captain stood paralyzed on his bridge. His submersible was dead in the mud. His radar was showing 12 ghost destroyers ready to annihilate him, and an invisible predator had him in a perfect firing solution from below. He was out of moves. The U.S. Navy wasn't finished. While the Yantar's crew was still reeling, their passive acoustic sensors lit up with a contact that turned every face in the sonar room white. It wasn't a torpedo. It was the USS Delaware, a 7,800-ton Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine. And it wasn't miles away. It was executing a textbook shadowing pass directly beneath the Yantar's keel at a depth of 60 feet. Imagine standing on a small boat in a blackout, and your sonar suddenly shows something the size of a skyscraper gliding, slowly, deliberately, right beneath your feet. The Russian sonar operator stared at his screen in silence. A 115-meter nuclear predator was passing below them at 20 knots. This wasn't a navigational accident. It was a deliberate, perfectly legal message delivered under international maritime regulations, COLREGs, with zero plausible deniability. The Delaware's captain never surfaced, never transmitted. The message required no words. We don't need to ram you. We don't need to shoot you. We are simply here, and you are already in our pocket. The game was over. The Yantar turned its bow back toward Murmansk, limping home through the freezing fog. It left behind a blind, paralyzed $50 million submersible drifting in the deep ocean mud, and its pride shattered somewhere between the surface chaos and the abyss. Not a single kinetic weapon was fired. The U.S. Navy had achieved total victory. The Atlantic Crossing 1 cable remained untouched and fully operational, and every electronic signature, every radar frequency, every acoustic profile of Russia's most advanced spy ship had been recorded, cataloged, and uploaded to Pentagon intelligence databases. The Yantar hadn't just failed. It had handed the Americans the exact blueprint on how to defeat it again. This is what modern undersea dominance actually looks like. Not explosions, not headlines. A silent chess match played 3,000 meters below the shipping lanes, decided in the space of 90 minutes, witnessed by no one. The Yantar limped home. The Delaware slipped back into the dark, and the North Atlantic returned to its freezing silence. The real question is how many of these encounters never surface at all. If you want to understand how the next war is actually being fought, not on the surface, but in the deep, in the electromagnetic spectrum, in the milliseconds between a radar pulse and its reflection, subscribe to Global Decode. The ocean looks calm. Beneath it, the game never stops.